This is a story the Army still whispers. A story of a nearly deaf, half-blind soldier who should have been sent home, but instead walked alone into machine gun fire to save an entire platoon. Before we begin, subscribe for more real American war legends. Now, let's step back into the jungles of the Pacific. 1943. The man the Army didn't want, Rodger Wilton Young, never looked like a hero. In fact, to many officers, he looked like someone who shouldn't even be there. Born in Tiffin, Ohio, raised in a small working-class town, Young grew up quiet, polite, unremarkable, the kind of boy who blended into the background. But what nobody saw was the steel inside him. An accident as a teenager left him partially blind and nearly deaf. Doctors said he'd never live a normal life, let alone serve in the military. But when World War II dragged millions of Americans across oceans, Young refused to stay behind. He volunteered for the Ohio National Guard, trained harder than men with twice his health, and became a marksman through sheer stubborn determination. Not because he had the gift of perfect sight, but because he worked harder than anyone else on the firing line. When his unit was activated and shipped to the Pacific, the Army quietly suggested he stay home. He refused. He told them, "If the boys are going, I'm going too." No one argued, because you don't argue with a man who already accepted death before stepping onto the ship. Into the Pacific hellscape. The 148th Infantry Regiment arrived in the Solomon Islands, a killing ground of mud, monsoon rain, mosquitoes the size of wasps, and Japanese soldiers who fought like they were born from the jungle. Young was assigned to an ordinary rifle company, carrying an M1 Garand strapped over a shoulder already weakened from his childhood accident. Despite his disabilities, he kept pace with men far taller, far stronger, far more physically capable. But what Young lacked in physique, he replaced with something far rarer: unshakable calm under fire. The Pacific was not Europe. There were no clean front lines. The Japanese soldiers fought from invisible bunkers, tunnels, spider holes, striking and melting into the green darkness. Every night, American foxholes shook with the screams of infiltrators charging with bayonets. And every night, Young stood his ground. The men trusted him, not because he looked like a hero, but because he never hesitated when others did. He was the quiet one, the reliable one, the man who carried more ammunition than anyone else because he wanted to pull his weight. The officers thought he should have been discharged. The soldiers thought he was the backbone of the platoon, but fate had a cruel sense of humor. The longer the 148th advanced through the jungle, the more obvious Young's impairments became. He couldn't hear commands unless shouted directly into his ear. He sometimes fired at shadows because his peripheral vision failed. The company commander noticed, then confronted him gently.
"You stay.
"Rodger,
Private.
we need every man alive. I'm sending you
Rank
back."
don't mean nothing
Young
out
begged
here
him,
anyway.
begged him not to do it. He didn't want to be separated from the boys he had trained with for years.
I'll earn it back.
He said he didn't want to live knowing he had abandoned them. The commander saw something in Young's eyes, a fire that didn't need to match his fragile body. So he made a compromise. Young would be demoted from corporal back to private, removing the risk of giving orders he couldn't hear properly. Most men would feel humiliated. Young didn't care. Rank didn't matter. Staying with his brothers mattered. And so he marched on, deeper into the jungle, unaware that destiny had already chosen his final battlefield. On July 31st, 1943, the 148th moved toward the village of Munda on New Georgia, a stronghold defended by experienced Japanese troops who had dug into the hills like termites into wood. Young's platoon was ordered to scout ahead. They moved silently through the thick canopy, boots sinking into mud, rifles raised, nerves stretched thin. Then it happened. The jungle erupted with machine gun fire. A Japanese ambush team, perfectly concealed, opened up from a camouflage position on a small ridge. The first burst dropped 2 men instantly. Another round shredded a sergeant's shoulder. The platoon hit the ground as bullets chewed through ferns inches above their backs. They were pinned, completely exposed, and death was seconds away. The lieutenant shouted for the men to fall back, but the machine gun had perfect elevation and was cutting down anything that moved. The Marines in similar situations often called these positions the meat grinder. The Army had a different term: suicide nests. Nobody got out alive. Young, lying near the rear of the formation, saw what others didn't. The wounded men closer to the enemy could not fall back. Without someone stopping the machine gun, the Japanese would kill the entire platoon one by one.
Roger, get down!
The lieutenant shouted again to retreat. The men froze, not because they were cowards, but because moving meant instant death. And then, before anyone could stop him, Rodger Young rose to a crouch. Someone yelled, "Roger, get down!" He didn't listen. He couldn't hear them. But he didn't need to. He knew what had to be done. He didn't sprint or scream or act like a Hollywood hero. He simply started crawling forward, alone, with grenades clipped to his belt and his rifle dragging in the mud behind him. The lieutenant saw him and tried to grab him, but Young slipped away like a shadow. And then the truth hit the men. Young wasn't retreating, he was attacking. Bullets stitched the earth around Young as he crawled directly toward the muzzle flashes. Leaves exploded into shreds. Tree bark erupted in splinters around his neck. The air filled with the metallic snaps of passing rounds. The Japanese gunners saw him and redirected their fire, assuming more soldiers were behind him. That split-second shift in fire was enough. The platoon fell back in an organized withdrawal, dragging the wounded. Young kept going. He reached a shallow ditch 20 yards from the machine gun nest. Any other soldier would have waited for backup, but Young wasn't looking for survival. He was looking for an angle. He pulled a grenade from his belt, pulled the pin with his teeth and crouched for 1 second, one perfect second, before lunging forward. A burst of machine gun fire struck Young across the torso, knocking him to his knees. The grenade fell from his hand. The men watching from the rear screamed for him to crawl back. He didn't. Bleeding heavily, barely conscious, Young dragged himself across the ground, fingers digging into the mud as he pulled his body forward like a man drowning, pulling toward air. He grabbed the grenade again, clutching it to his chest. And then, with the last strength he had, he rolled toward the base of the machine gun nest. The Japanese gunners shouted too late. The grenade detonated, a thunderous blast that silenced the entire ridge. The machine gun went quiet. The jungle fell still, and the men of the 148th knew instantly.
He did it!
Rodger Young had given everything. The price of one life. When the platoon retook the position minutes later, they found Young's body torn, but the Japanese machine gun crew scattered in pieces. The lieutenant knelt beside him in tears. The men didn't speak. They didn't need to.
Thank you, soldier.
Young had saved every single one of them. 20 American lives purchased with one American life. In the coming days, word of the one-man charge spread through the division. Officers shook their heads in disbelief. Soldiers whispered his name like a prayer. When the battalion commander heard the story, he simply said, "That's the kind of man you build a nation with." Immortality earned, not given, Young received the Medal of Honor, the highest military award, for valor far beyond the call of duty. But medals aren't what made him immortal. What made him immortal was the truth that defined him. He had every physical reason to stay home, but not a single moral reason. He wasn't tall. He wasn't strong. He wasn't a born warrior. He was just a young man who believed his friends' lives were worth more than his own. And in war, that belief is the purest form of courage. Today, military bases echo with ballads written in his honor. The Army's Marksmanship Award carries his name, and on a quiet grave in Ohio, people still visit to leave flowers, coins, and tiny American flags, all for a soldier the Army once thought too broken to serve. The legacy that still lives, Rodger Young taught the world that heroism is not about strength, but about sacrifice. He didn't stop a tank battalion or capture a city. He didn't lead troops into battle or command legendary units. He did something more powerful. He walked into fire alone so others could walk out alive. As long as there are American soldiers fighting in foreign lands, as long as courage is still tested in mud, snow, desert, and jungle, Rodger Young's story will remain a beacon. A reminder that sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones nobody expects. The quiet ones, the simple ones, the ones who fight not for glory but for each other.